So,
Got it.
well, it's 9 o'clock. I did see Tyler hop on. Hey, Tyler.
Hey, nice to be here.
Before we get started, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping procedures for this morning. First of all, thanks everybody for joining for our first webinar this off season. We're planning on doing many more this off season, including a few in-person education events as well, now that folks are getting vaccinated. So just keep an eye on your inbox for invitations as those become available. During the presentation today, if everyone can remain on mute, that way there isn't any background noise during the presentation from Michael and Tyler, that would be fantastic. If anybody has any technical issues, please put those into the chat and I will do my best to help you through those. Just be aware that most of the time the issues stem from your own Wi-Fi connection. If you have any questions as the presentation moves along, please put those into the chat too, and the presenter can answer those as they see fit. We are recording this morning, so this will be available on our YouTube channel in the next week or so. So if you ever want to refer back to it or share it with anybody else, you will be able to. And finally, if anyone has called in via telephone this morning, please send me an email at mfrey@pgahq.com. I'll put that in chat as well. That way we can just make sure you get your MSR credits for this morning. So before I hand it over, I'm just going to make a few introductions. We have Michael Napoleon here. Striving to continually innovate modern coaching methodology, Michael believes deeply in truly expert coaches produce lasting positive change, but with very little input. For years, Michael owned and operated a golf performance academy called Catalyst Golf Performance in the Chicago area. Catalyst incorporated golf coaches, golf fitness professionals, rehabilitation experts, nutritionalists, and club fitters under one roof to provide a comprehensive one-stop shop for improvement. In 2012, Michael began product R&D on an Overspeed training product called the SuperSpeed golf training system, released in the fall of 2014. Since the launch of SuperSpeed Golf, it has become a global brand and a new standard for speed. Now, with over 700 touring professionals actively working with SuperSpeed Golf, Michael and his team at SuperSpeed are making a distinct impact on the games of golfers all over the world. Michael speaks regularly at seminars, coaching summits, golf teaching symposiums, and many other events with the primary goal of educating fellow professionals not only about speed training, but also about the business strategy, golf biomechanics, and coaching science. Dr. Tyler Stanfield is an associate professor of biomechanics at Utah Valley University. He received his PhD from University of Tennessee, Knoxville in 2015. He is the director of Biomechanics Laboratory at the Utah Valley University, where he conducts research related to sports performance and injury. Recently, he has completed studies related to the development of clubhead speed using ground reaction force and the effect of speed training on these parameters. He has also been working extensively with the athletics department at his university, analyzing jumping and landing force for the performance and injury prevention. He has published 10 full articles and over 50 presentations at regional, national, and international conference. Tyler is an avid recreational golfer as well as TPI certified. With that, I will turn it over to Tyler and Michael.
Matt, thanks a lot. Appreciate the thorough introduction. So, yeah, I mean, big picture here. Let's start with this. You know, I've been in the business of coaching for a while now, and you know, kind of one of the passions that we've always had was trying to find ways, you know, help people get better at golf in a way that's, I would say, more accessible, that's easier, that you know, results happen faster, and all of those different things have really kind of led to what we do with SuperSpeed. A little bit about our program for today. We're going to go through, you know, kind of a brief overview of, I would say, the high-level stuff that we do with SuperSpeed as far as the products go, and then I really want to get in to talk about some of the different business strategies that we've seen work as far as implementing different types of clinic programs or things at your facilities centered around speed, because I think that's stuff that you can use tomorrow, and I think over the winter especially is a great time to start some of those programs. And then Tyler's going to hop in as well throughout the presentation and kind of add the science spin to everything. And then also he's been doing a number of different studies with our products recently. We had a bunch of them that just completed, so we're really excited to share some of the new information, or I would say some slight changes in things that we're going to do to some of our protocols and how we actually present some of that information to make it even easier for the end consumer to digest and get better with. Tyler, you want to say anything while I pull up the presentation here?
Yeah, no, just great to be with you. And as kind of Mike said, it's been kind of exciting from my standpoint to, again, as Mike said, put a little bit more of some numbers besides just club head speed. As I've kind of dived deeper into some of the biomechanics of what's happening as a result of this speed training, and just some exciting things that we'll be able to share throughout the course of this presentation.
Okay, great. Also, guys, just so you know, I know it's 9 o'clock for you guys. I'm out in Denver. Tyler's out in Utah, so we're bright and early here. So if you see us sipping some coffee, that's why. Can everybody see my screen now? Are we good to go on seeing the slides?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. I can't see the chat or anything right now. So please feel free to type some questions in the chat, and then we'll also answer some questions live here at the end for sure. All right, here we go. So, I mean, I would say where all of this started was us taking a very deep dive, looking at the answers to this question, and really looking at what affects how far a player can hit a golf ball. Because at our golf academy, I mean, we were teaching mainly like business executive, country club style golfers in the Chicago area. And every single person that came through the door was asking for more speed in one way or another, whether that was, they wanted to hit it off the tee further, which is an obvious one, or it was, I want to land the ball softer in the green. I don't hit my longer irons as well, and I really don't want to play 7 hybrids in my bag. Or there's a lot of different pieces where club speed becomes very effective. I think at this point, the argument's pretty much over that, gaining swing speed is going to have a positive impact on every aspect of the game. I'd love to get into that for the next 30 minutes too, but I think we have some other stuff that trumps it at this point, just because, every golf statistician, every one of these type of people like your Mark Brody's and your Scott Fawcett's and all of these guys out there, it's a very easy argument to win now that mathematically it is going to make a positive effect if you increase your swing speed. So if we answer this question, I think we can answer this in a broad way, which is what I want to do first. And that's looking at this in the term of basically 4 broad categories that affect swing speed. We're golf coaches. I think near and dear to our hearts is always going to be swing mechanics. Swing mechanics is certainly an important aspect to hitting the ball farther, but it's not the only thing that's going to affect how far we hit the ball. So I'd consider that one category. I would consider, impact physics being all of the different things you could measure on TrackMan. Basically, the physics of how the club head and the ball interact. That's going to be another incredibly important category. I think another category that's become bigger and bigger in the golf world over the last 20 years is the physical. Obviously, that's a big deal too. I like to use an analogy here of like a race car, and there's different components to making a race car go really fast out on the track. One of them would be the size of the engine, and that's really what we're looking at when we talk about the physical characteristics of the player. The bigger the engine has more potential to go really fast. It's not a guarantee. We have to add in those other categories, because if it doesn't have the right mechanical components to take advantage of that engine, we're obviously not going to go as fast as we could. And if we're not, matching up the right kind of tires and different, external components of the car to the track, we're not going to go as fast as we could that day. That's more into that impact physics and equipment fitting side. There's one more piece of that puzzle, though, that I think is really important, and that's the one that hasn't been talked about as much until we came along, and now we talk about it all the time, and that's what we call the neurological. And think of this in the race car analogy as being like the computer that makes all of those different systems work in harmony together to max out the actual performance. Now, in the human body, that's represented by a system, well, really our neuromuscular system, and something that we call the motor unit. Now, motor units are incredibly important to how we move as human beings, not just how we swing a golf club, but how we walk, ride a bike. Anything that we've learned how to do functions in our body as what we call a motor unit. This starts in our brain. All of these different motor programs live in our brain. And when we step out on the first tee, let's say to hit a drive down the center, our brain selects a specific motor program based on history and learning and everything else we've done, selects this motor program. Then physically an electrical signal starts in our brain, travels down our central nervous system, arrives at our muscles, and then our muscles respond with that program motion. Now, I'm sure Tyler could go into more detail. We're probably not going to do that today on this system. For the doctors out there, that's an oversimplification of how this works. But as coaches, I think that's really important. We just need to know that the signal lives and starts in our brain, and then our muscles respond. What's interesting when you start to look at the science of how motor units work is the signal that you send doesn't necessarily change. So whether the shot that I hit out on the first tee goes right down the center, or I push it into the right rough, or I pull it into the left rough, in general, the motor program was exactly the same signal sent to my body, and my body had a varied response to that signal. Now, that's important for a lot of different reasons in the coaching world, which again is another probably 2-day seminar that we could go through. But it's also very important to the speed training world, because what this system also has involved is a feedback system. So after we hit that shot, we immediately, our brain starts asking the question of, well, did this go where I want it? Is this happening the way I want it to? Or is there something that isn't exactly the same? And, if it's right down the center, we move on. But if it's not, all of a sudden now that kind of shocks the system and says, well, are we expecting a different result or something else? Let me show you how that works as it fits into speed training. In our speed training sets, we have three clubs. One's about 20% lighter than the driver, one's about 10% lighter, and one's about 5% heavier than the driver. Now, when we go through one of these programs, players swing on average about 19% faster when they have that green club in their hand versus their normal driver. Now, that's a lot. That's a huge change in speed that happens very quickly when we start doing this training. And for many of you that use launch monitors when you coach, if you just ask somebody, can you try to swing 19, excuse me, or 20% faster than your normal swing, it's probably not going to happen on that next swing out of the gate. In fact, usually what you see is that the speed stays about the same when you ask them to swing faster, or it may even go down by a mile an hour or two because the player really doesn't know, their body doesn't have a motor program to go faster than what they're usually doing. So unless we do something to change that or to get the body to expect this faster result, we're not going to ever really change that swing speed. Now, what happens in just a very short amount of time, just a handful of golf swings, is that feedback system starts to work. Your brain starts to expect your body to go at this much faster speed that we are able to achieve by just reducing the resistance in the golf swing by a tiny amount. So then we shock the system again and add resistance back. So then we go to this blue club. During the training, we're still going to see them swinging about 17% faster than their normal swing speed. Now, that's a big deal because we're adding weight back. We're still going a lot faster. Then we're actually going to go to a club that's a little bit heavier than the player's driver. We're still going to see them swinging on average about 12% faster than their normal swing speed. Now, this is kind of the magic of overspeed training, because if I give a player a heavy club or a swing fan or even the red club in our SuperSpeed set first, they will lose swing speed 100% of the time. The actual speed that club is going to be moving usually goes down by about 6 to 7%. It's all about this neuromuscular, neurological reset of changing that expectation of how fast the golf swing is supposed to go. So if I want to define overspeed training in detail, it's really just making a player's body move faster than normal, during a known motor program that's already there in the brain in order to reset that expectation of how fast the body's going to move. Let's think of that in another way that I think is very effective for you as coaches. It also means that we're accessing speed that player's body is already capable of producing, and for whatever reason, the brain's just shut off. And I mean, there's a million reasons the brain can shut off ability to access speed, a million reasons it can shut off ability to access range of motion or other things physically. You know, the biggest being that maybe there was an injury or there was a history of pain when they made that movement, or it's just something that player feels like they're supposed to be doing. And that's kind of goes into us as coaches looking at it as, well, that might be our fault for telling them to, you know, try to do this technical move in your golf swing. And they start to focus on that instead of just being athletic and making this one big movement. All of a sudden we can start to actually put in our own neurological limiters on how fast that speed is capable of producing. So overspeed training is really about taking the governor off the engine, allowing that player to access speed they can already produce, and really trying to max out what we're getting out of what that player is currently capable of.
Yeah, and I might add here, Mike, just as you're talking about that, and some of the work I've done in my lab with even just therapy patients, like post-stroke or something like that. This same principle holds true with a lot of different movement patterns that you suggested. When I bring in a stroke patient and tell them to walk faster in my lab, they actually can, and then they actually walk better as I just give them that stimulus to walk faster. And so that principle of kind of a neuromuscular governor we see in a lot of research fields, we definitely see as it relates to golf as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you would see this even, I would say, in the fitness training world or even the rehabilitative fitness world. Even if you're dealing with people, you don't have to be dealing with somebody that's had a major trauma like a stroke even. I mean, it's just little things. Like I see fitness professionals all the time help people gain, 10, 15 degrees of range of motion, let's say, with the way they rotate their torso. Just because the player's not done it for a long time, the player's body's not used to doing it, and the brain just kind of forgets how. Would that be a good way to characterize that, Tyler?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, right? Is those abilities are there. We just have to relearn or kind of reteach what those positions feel like and how that activation would look. I love that.
Yeah, and again, that's really what we've done with our SuperSpeed golf training protocols, coupled with those SuperSpeed sets. The fact that we're using those lighter clubs, which allows the player to move faster, is really just that way of creating that stimulus of allowing their body to move faster in the golf swing. And then we're able to see these big changes as we go through the training process. Now, that brings us to kind of looking at the way our training protocols actually do work. And this will be a little inside joke for Tyler, but I have gotten word that our updated training protocols and training cycles, which we're going to go over today, are going to be live on the website as of today. So those should all be up there. So if anyone has any other questions on these training protocols, you're going to be able to access all this information just on our website. Just go to superspeedgolf.com, click on the training tab, and then you'll be able to access all of the different training content that we have for our products, which I would say totals at least 3 years worth of time that you can work with players on this. Now, what's cool about the training protocols is we use a lot of different drills and positional elements in these drills that basically trick players into working on a lot of different aspects of their swing, especially different mechanics of the swing, without really ever telling them that they're doing it. And, in my experience as a coach, I consider that kind of like the gold standard of coaching. Like if you can help somebody improve their performance, help somebody improve different aspects of the way they use the ground or the way they sequence or the way they lag the club, and you never had to tell that player that there was a problem in the first place, I mean, that's like gold standard. That's the absolute best you can possibly do, because you didn't have to tell somebody they were broken before you can actually start to fix them. That's something that all of our protocols do tend to do, which I'm really excited about. We also do non-dominant training in all of our protocols, and this has been something that, forever, was something that wasn't really done in the golf world, but was done in almost every other sport imaginable. We introduced this in a major way in the golf industry. Have seen extremely positive results from it. It's been kind of interesting. Very recently, we did actually we've started to see a little bit of I would say chatter on social media that non-dominant training is not necessarily a positive thing or something that's necessary to doing this training, and we just think that's crazy. So I wanted Tyler to hop in a little bit here too. We wanted to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we do with non-dominant training and why it's important. There's also a great video on our YouTube channel that Tyler and I did all about non-dominant training. So I just wanted to give the overview, and then Tyler, we can talk about a couple of those studies real quick.
Yeah, and this becomes one of those things that could become a long seminar on its own as well. But just to hit briefly, as Mike said, there's just such great things when you're looking at this type of neuromuscular training. There's this idea that when you can start giving a known task and alter the conditions a little bit, it enhances that neuromuscular response. And on the previous slide, Mike had a couple of research studies that looked at this, where we look at things in soccer and long jumping and field hockey, where they actually train the non-dominant performance leg, the one they wouldn't be jumping on, the one they wouldn't be using as their dominant soccer kick. And the skill acquisition improves, force production improves, kick velocity improved. And this is pretty well understood in a lot of research outside of the golf world, that activating that non-dominant system, really learning how to coordinate kind of the pelvis trunk, that transfer of energy between the two, needs to be going both dominant rotations, non-dominant rotations. I think it has a big part of injury prevention to create at least some level of symmetry. Now, we're not suggesting that golfers should be symmetrical, because it is that rotational sport to one side, but there is some level of symmetry that we need in that. And as Mike talked about some of the studies we're doing, this is stuff that we believe in so strongly that now we're actually in the midst of some research studies where we're looking at the effects of just non-dominant only speed training. And in some of the pilot studies I've done in my lab, I've seen a lot of really great results in terms of huge speed gains with players who only swing these sticks fast on the non-dominant side. And so this is another one of those avenues, Mike, that I think we're gonna have a lot of great research soon to back up those things that we're seeing already.
Yeah, like I said, from my perspective, we always did this with our players in our academies, whether it was speed training or whatever. And it's also something that, I mean, again, I don't think any self-respecting physio or fitness professional would ever take somebody in the gym and not work both sides of the body in an exercise. But when you start to think about that in a more skill-related piece on the skill side, the speed side in golf, it's amazing the results you'd have. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there because this is something the best players in the world are doing, and I think it's always worth finding out more information about good stuff. But it's in every one of our protocols. So if you start speed training with your players, they're going to get a lot of this benefit of non-dominant training as well. Okay, so now let's look at how we're going to be looking at our training cycles for SuperSpeed and our protocols and progression. We have 5 levels of training protocols for our main Overspeed training set at SuperSpeed. These 5 levels are progressive. The drills require more coordination. They, I would say, get more aggressive with the type of drill positions we do. And honestly, those 5 levels, we tend to look at spreading out over 3 separate training cycles. The first, involving the first 2 levels in a 10-week program we call a primary training phase, where we're going to have that player train 3 days a week with a day off in between. So that's an intense training phase. And then move into a maintenance training phase where we can reduce the frequency of the training down to about once a week and maintain all of those gains. I think this is an incredibly important change that we've done from our current recommendations, which was really just kind of a straight through model. We just have looked at what our players have done with these protocols over the last 7 years. And most players, professional or amateur alike, don't just train 3 days a week forever. They're going to do it in these kind of training cycles that sort of fit more of the model of where we see improvement, where we'll kind of see a jump in speed right after they do the first session. And then, about a say 6 to 10 week period of what we call normalization, of basically creating permanency in that first speed jump. And then once we get to that point of permanency, we can reduce the training and go into more of a maintenance training. Tyler actually did some studies on this for us. Tyler, if you want to talk about that a little bit now.
Yeah, and this was kind of where I started with SuperSpeed in terms of kind of what these protocols should look like and how we could tweak them to take what already was working really well and maybe make it work better and be more practical for the golfer. So this is where if we can get to, the 8 to 10 weeks of this really intense ramp up training, again, we see that normalization of the speed really maintain a little bit better. And then I think a big part of this too, Mike, is that this is intense training. And so to think about just doing this start to finish throughout, there are some people that would respond okay to that. But most individuals, it's going to be really beneficial for them to come down from that intense training cycle, do 1 day a week, and have either, you could do that during your golf season where you're doing 1 day a week. And so you're not kind of having these bumps in speed throughout. It makes for a really great kind of winter 10 or 15-week training program, and then into kind of these maintenance phases. And people will ask me, well, hey, Tyler, do you think 1 day a week is enough to maintain those speeds? And it really is. That there's such good research out there about the idea of periodization in training. And when you're dealing with these high velocity contractions like overspeed training is, you have to do that every 5 to 7 days to maintain those speed benefits. And so when all we're asking golfers to do is just to continue to do this 15 minutes a week to maintain what they've been able to build, I think we're going to see maybe even some better results than what we've seen in the past with these new protocols.
Yeah, we're excited. I think a couple things on the coaching side here that are really important. Let's say you have a player that has like a competitive stretch of tournaments that they need to play really well for, whether it's a junior athlete, higher level player, even a club player that's got to play their club championship or member guest or things they want to do well for. You wouldn't want to be like in the first week of speed training when you're gonna be playing the Masters. You really want to be in one of these maintenance phases by that point. So I think that allows for a little bit more, I would say, better timing of when to do the training, when to start it. I think can be very effective for players. One other change that we're going to be adding in here as well, we'll also be putting rest periods inside of the protocols. So when you see the new protocol videos, before the player gets to the red club in the series every time, we're going to add in a little bit of a break just to let them catch their breath and go. For those of you that have done our protocols, you know that you do get fairly, they're fairly intense and they'll tire you out pretty quickly, even in the course of that like 6 to 8 minute training protocol. So that's also some new stuff that's coming. Now, just to look at the other categories here very quickly and just get some highlights. The physical is obviously very important, right? To getting more speed, getting a bigger engine is a big deal. We coach this guy most of the time, right? Like somebody sitting in an office that's not probably, a 5-star athlete at every different point in their month. One of the biggest things that we look at with these kind of players when they're coming into you for a golf lesson, coaching session, is they don't even tend to know how to warm up. I think you see this type of stuff all the time out on the course. Like people don't even know really what they should do. From a warming up standpoint, the most effective thing is what we call muscle activation. So we need to get the muscles awake, working, blood flow to the joints. All of these different pieces are really key. So some of the other new stuff that we have coming that you'll see on our website, again, as of today, we have 2 new warm-up protocols that we're going to do, in addition to the just general body dynamic warm-up that we've had for a while. So check those out. I think that's a really cool thing. Just some other neat stuff that's going to really help people get a little bit more ready to play golf before a wrap. Mechanics, again, I'm a golf coach. Tyler's a golf biomechanist. I think all of us in this room we love mechanics. I think they're important, very important to what we're doing. We like to look at this again in a little bit of a broad way that I would say maybe something we can all agree on mechanics instead of looking at the different style points of how. And that's something that we call the speed pyramid. This really looks at how the player interacts with the ground, how those forces and torques using the ground interact with the body to help create rotational motion, and then how do the different segments of our body sequence rotationally, and how does that eventually work its way up to the arms, hands, club, where we're actually going to apply that rotational velocity to the ball. So the speed pyramid kind of works ground up, but also looks at how these different areas that there's so much talk about now and so much great technology to measure really interrelate and work together. You know, because I think we could do a 2-day seminar about ground force mechanics or about sequencing or about lag and wrist mechanics. But if we don't look at how those interrelate and how they affect each other, I think we're kind of missing the boat there. Tyler, you want to go through some of the ground force basics that you like to talk about and that we like to talk about, and then some of the results that we've had with the studies that we've done on ground force?
Yeah, for sure. And as Mike talks about, you know, I'm pretty fortunate that as we look at these tools to analyze golf swings, I'm pretty spoiled to have the very best, the most expensive tools to kind of look at this. And one of the first things that I wanted to look at was kind of how golfers use the ground, the base of that speed pyramid. And so this is just a nice visual you see of a golfer. These blue arrows that are moving up and down, these are our force vectors. And what these are trying to represent is as a golfer pushes down on the ground pushes back on the golfer. And as you look at these force vectors, you notice what happens is the length of them changes, which means the magnitude or how big that force is going to change. But another key component of it is the direction of these forces. Now, the directions of these forces, we can measure what's going up and down in the golfer or the vertical force. We can measure what's going towards the target or away from the target, and that's kind of our horizontal force. And then we could also look at actually what's going kind of in front of the golfer forward and behind the golfer backward. And there's a lot of really great research on what aspects of the ground reaction force actually correlate the closest to increased club head speed and better swing mechanics. And so that's kind of where I started with SuperSpeed, is I wanted to see, okay, we know that speed gains happen as a result of overspeed training. And we knew what those numbers were from all the good work that SuperSpeed had done before I kind of came and said, hey, can I collect some data for you? And so what my study did is brought people into my lab. I put them on ground reaction force plates and looked at kind of a pre-swing with club head speed on a TrackMan in my golf simulator, and also looked at how these forces change after 6 weeks of training. So they took their speed sticks home, did 6 weeks of training via our level 1 protocol. And then what happened is I brought them back into my lab to say what happens, especially to these key ground reaction force parameters as a result of the speed training.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note here too, just from a coaching aspect, is that, I mean, you can go online and you can probably spend weeks reading literature, videos about all kinds of intricate details of ground reaction force and how it affects the golf swing. You know, I want to take 5 minutes and summarize just what's important, and we can show you then kind of what our results were from having players go through the speed training. You know, one of my favorite ways to talk about this is that force precedes motion. So if you think about that, the way that player is pushing on the ground is going to have a very big effect on the way they move in their golf swing. I think there's some very important parameters here that we like to check. That's like intensity of how much force that player is able to produce. Okay, that's really important. I think another parameter that's important is to make sure that they're pushing in the right directions to create the right type of torques in order to actually have that become effective speed in their swing. And I think another one that's incredibly important is having it all happen at the right time. Would you agree with that, Tyler?
Yeah, it's such a great point. I always like doing these events with Mike because sometimes I can get lost in the science of the thousands of data points that I collect. And I think Mike sums it up really nicely with his coaching experience to say, hey, back down off that science ledge, Tyler, and let's look at what these things are. And it really is, how much force can you produce? Is it in the right direction? And is it occurring at the right time? And we can really boil it down to those three things.
All right, so let's look at the first result that we saw in our study.
Yeah, and this is one of the first things we look at in terms of correlation of club head speed, and we're talking lead leg vertical force in the downswing. So this is how much is that lead leg pushing on the ground pushes back on you, and this is a force that's going to occur and should peak fairly early on in that downswing. And this is, again, a variable that's highly correlated to club head speed. And what we found for these golfers was that after 6 weeks of training, we had an increase of about 18% in their maximum vertical force produced.
Yeah, and this is the Justin Thomas's lead foot coming off the ground down to impact, right before impact, those kind of things. That's what this is causing.
Yeah, and Mike always asks that question, is 18% a lot? Because we throw these percentages around, and if I'm working with my athletics department and my strength and conditioning coaches there and say, hey, I can give you 18% more force as a result of this 6-week training program, every one of their athletes are going to be doing it that afternoon. I mean, it's that significant of a number. This graph right here I like with that Mike brought up. This talks about the timing of that force, which is such a key component of transferring that energy from the ground through the body and then out to the arms and to the club. So this was a golfer that I brought into my lab, and I see this. I mean, I just saw this last week doing a data collection in my lab, which was a lot of amateur golfers really struggle to get force moving forward early enough in the downswing. And so this red curve was a pre-training vertical force curve. And so you can see that yellow line is club impact. And you can see before he trained with SuperSpeed, his peaking was occurring right at impact. Again, way too late for him to transfer any energy through the ground and out to the club. And so after 6 weeks of training, I mean, yes, we see a huge bump in the overall magnitude of that force from about 90% of his body weight all the way up to about 130% of his body weight. Tons more force he's producing. But also as exciting to me was the fact that now he's peaking right at about 83% of the downswing. Now, where does that 83% of the downswing occur and why is it important? This is roughly about club vertical, club parallel, kind of in that position. And some research on some elite level players, professional tour players, say that they peak that force at about 83% of the downswing. And so you can see this golfer gets two really important things that happen: more force and better timing of that force. This golfer ended up picking up about 15 miles per hour on his club speed after the 6 weeks of training because there was a lot of low-hanging fruit there. He was producing very little force and producing it at the wrong time.
Yeah, the timing thing is very important. If you think about peak vertical force on the lead leg, like what's that actually doing? This is that force that's really causing, the vertical part of it, not necessarily, but this force also generally is pushing the golfer's like lead hip back around and up, and happening at the right time. For those of you that work with 3D motion capture, generally that same point correlates with when the pelvis is stabilizing, allowing rotational speed to transfer up the chain as well. So this is really cool stuff. We think ground force is so important. We're actually, we've partnered with some other companies to even create some training protocols using other training aids, one of them being the force pedal, where we've created protocols now that actually work specifically on ground force efficiency. So that's something else to check out. That's on our website. But we have a whole protocol using the SuperSpeed clubs, the player's own clubs, and hitting balls, and then also the force pedal products in this case. Now, we could move on to the middle part of the pyramid and look at kinematics and sequencing. We're not going to get deep into this. I just want to show you some study results that we've had in the past. This is actually previous to even when Tyler was working with some of these studies. But we've always been able to see big increases in peak rotational velocity of the segments in the kinematic sequence. So this is huge numbers for those of you that work with 3D. Changing the I would say patterning of the kinematic sequences is not an easy thing to do as a coach, but we see big numbers in the increase in rotational velocity. This correlates very closely with those increases in force. Getting to the top of the pyramid, up to the lag and wrist mechanics side, we actually have another product out called our SuperSpeed C training system, which uses counterweight training to actually improve the efficiency of, let's say, translating rotational velocity into linear velocity so that we can max out our club speed. It's another great product that has 3 of its own protocols. It's a great add-on to your overspeed training. If you have those players that are seeing big results in the body segments and having a little trouble translating it out to actual club speed, this is kind of the answer for that. We came out with this a couple years ago to really fix that problem. The last category I'd like to talk about is that impact physics piece. And again, this is all the different things that you can measure on TrackMan. This comes down to, all the cool things that we've talked about in the past about maximizing smash factor, like centerness of contact, looking at club speed, ball speed, all those different areas there. Again, don't really have time to get into it in great detail today, but would love to in the future. This is also where club fitting lives. So, optimizing and making sure that the club that player's swinging is optimizing the speed that they're getting. I think it's incredibly important to note here that if a player goes through your program and gains 5 or 6 miles an hour in swing speed and effective club speed, that's a great opportunity to say, we probably need to go through a club fitting session and make sure that, what you were using before is still, is probably not optimizing your new speed gain. So I think that's another just low-hanging fruit for everybody. You go through these speed training protocols, people get better. Now all the time it's time to fit them for clubs. We have a couple other things I want to talk to you about today, and then we'll answer a bunch of questions. We do use a launch monitor system that's called the PRGR launch monitor to assist with our speed training, but it's also a great device for all of your players. Measures club speed, ball speed, smash factor, and then distance. This thing is incredibly accurate. It's cool. It also measures how fast the club's going to move without hitting a ball. Now that's great because this is a one-stop shop for being able to have a player hit a ball and get before and after data to show them real results in effective club speed right there. But it also allows you to use this with our SuperSpeed clubs during speed training so that player gets direct feedback on every swing that they take during that session. That's incredibly important because that allows that player to kind of go through that discovery learning process of saying, okay, that swing didn't go faster than the one before it. And then all of a sudden one goes 3 or 4 miles an hour faster, so they can remember those feels that make it go faster. And this really accelerates that learning process. So check out our PRGR launch monitors. We bundle these with the sets on our website. You guys all get wholesale pricing on all of our products, speed training products, these radars, all of it. So that's a great tool and something that we can help offer you at a pretty big discount to help with all this process. If I was still running my academy business, every single person that I coached would own one of these launch monitors. I'd probably give it to them as part of their sign-up bonus in their program, just so that they'd have some feedback when they're practicing. We also have an impact spray called Strike Spray. It's a great way for players to work on centerness of contact. Another great product to check out there. We can answer some questions on that too. Okay, Tyler, let's wrap this thing up with I think some programs that we can help you guys with at your facilities. I mean, obviously we're right at that time of year where everybody's looking for Christmas presents. Just so you know, all of our stuff's in stock and ready to ship. So if there's anything we can do to help get some cool speed training products for their loved ones over the holidays, just let us know. We're happy to help you. And again, you get wholesale pricing, so you can make some money on that as well. Probably my favorite program that I want to talk about a little bit is our Speed Clinic program. This is one that we're running out at TPI. But these programs, as people are getting back to golf courses and want to do some things in groups, and these programs are just an absolute home run. We've been endorsing this business model for you to run at your facilities for a couple of years now. We've seen great success. So what you really do with this program, it's a pretty simple, the math side's pretty simple. We recommend that you charge about $350 for a 6-week series of classes with our speed clinics. Now that $350 actually includes a set of the speed sticks, a set of the SuperSpeed clubs for everybody in the class. So that's already a $200 value. So you're looking at about $25 per session for that player. And we recommend half-hour clinics is really the best way to go. You guys get access to our stuff at wholesale pricing. So you're going to be able to make a little bit of money here, not only on those service dollars, but also on that included equipment. So this program really ends up being, for 3 hours of total work, about a $700 an hour program for you in profit, but also it becomes that really exciting, great hook for you to get new people into your academies or into your lesson programs that may not have come in for private lessons before, and offers you that opportunity to then take them from the speed clinic into other programs that you might offer. So I think it's a great program to get going with that. We also have a great tournament gift program for this next year, we're offering some discounted prices on products if you want to bring them in as a tea gift for your member guest or your member or those type of programs. So again, we're really excited about a lot of this stuff that we have coming. You know, and I think at this point we are happy to answer a bunch of questions or whatever else we can do. Tyler, I know you have a class you've got to teach at 8, correct?
Yeah, I got about 15 minutes before I have to go to talk to people who are probably a little bit less engaged with the material at 8 a.m. of finals week.
All right, great. Well, Tyler will have to hop on then. I'm happy to stay on a little bit past that if I need to answer all these questions, but let's go ahead and get started with that. Matt, do we have anything in chat that we want to talk about?
The only question we got, Tyler kind of addressed about how to access wholesale pricing for the program.
Outstanding. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll follow up with some email assets that we can get to everybody after this. So yeah, absolutely. So does anybody have any questions about, I'd say, anything speed training? You've got us here. We can answer whatever we can for you.
Yeah,
and I think it would be fine if you wanted to do like a raise hand or even just open mic, and we can talk about it if you want, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, since the presentation's over, if anyone does have a question, just go ahead and unmute yourselves and you can ask verbally.
Hi, guys. This is Ben Debsky at Springhaven. Just wondering if you have more success, discussing right side versus left side in terms of, using ground forces. Thanks for your presentation.
Sorry, one sec. Just to clarify, right side versus left side for ground forces. Are you talking about trail leg forces, lead leg forces? What exactly are you asking?
Just wondering if you have greater success doing one or the other, or whether, I guess trail side versus lead side, and if you have more success gaining speed discussing one side versus the other.
Yeah, I'd take the overview and then you can take the detail. I would say the way a player is pushing on the ground is going to have an effect no matter what they're doing on the way they're going to move. And that can be done efficiently or inefficiently. So I would say that on the big level, all of those forces are very important. As far as the ones that correlate the absolute most to speed, I'll let Tyler take that part.
Yeah, so Ben, that's a great question. The ones that correlate the highest to speed are some of those lead leg forces in the downswing, Ben, which would be that vertical force on the lead leg, which we already talked about pretty in-depthly. One of the other really big ones, Ben, is that backward force that's pointing behind the golfer in the downswing. And that's what kind of Mike described, that kind of push open of kind of the body, that force preceding the motion. And you see this in a lot of long drive guys. And Mike mentioned Justin Thomas. That was a force that increased by almost 20% as a result of the speed training. Interestingly enough, Ben, an aspect of the research study that surprised me was some forces that I saw on the trail leg. And this is kind of the ability of that golfer to really kind of load that trail leg during the backswing. And what I found is that as a result of the 6 weeks of speed training, that kind of loading of the trail leg in the backswing, they got a lot better loading to the tune of about 15% as well, Ben. Now, that's probably the one variable that's the most highly correlated to club head speed. And I'll be honest, I wasn't really expecting to see that from our level 1 protocols. Down the road in our like level 2 and 3, we have some drills that are really trying to teach that to these golfers, really trying to load that force into the trail leg. But even in just the level 1 protocols, that trail leg force actually increased even without the drills that were specifically tailored to that, which was kind of exciting for me to see.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that there is more than one way to use the ground efficiently in the golf swing. Like, not everybody uses forces exactly the same way. I think the most generalized way I could say it is there's a lot of players that work much more in what I would call like a horizontal plane torque. So these are going to be players that work more rotationally in the way they swing. So mean, there's a lot of different players out there like that, but more of like a Gary Woodland kind of swing. And then you have a lot of players that work more in kind of more vertical plane torques. So like creating more vertical motion in the swing, like more of like a Justin Thomas kind of swing, or another one would be like a more horizontal plane type guy would be more of like a Dustin Johnson versus, maybe like a Bubba Watson's going to be more on those vertical plane torques. So just, there's a lot in there. Like, I mean, diving into that category, we could go on forever, but it's all very important. It's all exciting. It's just finding easy ways to coach it is really what we're after, and how we're trying to help you guys. Okay, what else? We've got Roger Hoover. Go ahead. I think I had somebody raise their hand. You can go ahead and unmute your mic and just ask us your question.
Yeah, Roger, you'll have to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you. Hugh, if you want to go ahead and ask while Roger's working on it, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi,
Yeah,
Hugh.
I think that's a great idea, that course you had where it includes the sticks. Is there like a syllabus, or like does it train me how to train them? I know a lot about the swing, but I've never used your stuff before.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I believe, Matt, we're going to be following up with an email blast to everybody on this, correct, afterwards?
Absolutely, yes.
In that's going to be a link to a just full layout of exactly how to do that speed clinic program. I mean, from minute by minute syllabus of what to do during the class, how to help the class warm up, collect data, go through the speed training, all of it. Now, the speed training protocols are just on our website, so you can access that for free and go through, like, because that program really works mainly with our level 1 protocol and then the level 2 protocol in the last week. But yes, we have a full packet that'll show you exactly the best practices on marketing that program, on setting it up, how to do it, when to order the product so that they all have it by the first day. All of that stuff is laid out for you. I'd also mention too that we also have a certification program. So we have a SuperSpeed certified program. It's available at superspeedcertified.com.
Oh, okay.
That, if you're interested in more of the science behind overspeed training and getting a lot more into the science of ground reaction force, rotational sequencing and biomechanics, all of that, we have a 3-level online certification that's available. All of you also, I believe, get MSR credits if you go through that program. But yes, you'll be getting an email after this that would walk you through step by step how to get the speed clinic started at your facility.
Now, do you also have any kind of signage or banner that I could put up in my stalls? Because that always looks really impressive. Like, you know what I mean? Not only does it give legitimacy to me, but it'll help sell your product and make people believe in it too. Do you have something like that?
We have all kinds of different options on that end. So those would be things if you just wanted to email us directly, info@SuperSpeed Golf. We have some different assets there that we could send you. Correct.
Wait, you just broke up with the email address. Can you say it again?
Oh, sorry. It's info@superspeedgolf.com.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
There, Tyler put it in the chat as well. Okay.
Hey, Matt.
Anthony, why don't you go ahead? Oh, Roger, you there? Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, I figured it out. Just a quick question on the correlation on the trail heel at impact. You see like a Kepka where the foot's down pretty long, and then you see like a Morikawa where the heel is up. I get questions sometimes about that. Like, where is there any correlation between the speed on something like that, or?
Yes. Tyler, you can jump in on there too. I think this is going to look again at players that are much more horizontally rotational. So these are players that are going to be using more push forward and back to create rotational torque on the ground versus those that are creating those kind of torques more up and down. So that is going to affect somewhat of what you see as far as where the position of that lead foot's going to be. From a point of application standpoint, we don't see a huge change there, but it is subtle that there is a little bit different. Most of the time that lead force is being pushed into the ground toward the ball of the lead foot. So if you think about it, when I'm in my downswing, I'm actually pushing forward toward the ball with my lead foot, and then that reaction force is pushing my body back and away from from the piece. So that is kind of really key, but it's going to go into that same idea of a player that's more rotationally torque oriented could get a little further toward the heel in their front foot, versus a player that's more vertically oriented is going to stay more toward the ball, and that heel could be coming up more in that foot. Tyler, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that captures, I think, just the differences between these players as a biomechanist looking at the body type and the way they're already generating speed. Sometimes it's just about enhancing what they're already doing well because of the way their body's set up to move. So
Hey guys, you mind if I jump in on this real quick? Because that's something I get from what he's looking for. The answer he wants really is that weight should be rolling on the inside of that back foot. It doesn't matter how much the heel comes up or not. If you have more flexibility, the heel, like if you look at Roy McIlroy, his heel doesn't come up very much because he has so much flexibility. But as long as that heel's not coming straight up, right? Or
I would say that certainly, I mean, ankle dorsiflexion,
one thing
inversion of the ankle is going to have a major effect.
Yeah.
I guess the point
Yeah.
I'm trying to make, though, is that the exact direction of the force that's going through that lead foot, lead heel, and the exact direction of that force is going to be slightly different with different players depending on how they're using the ground to create speed.
Well, correct. And you're using the ground the best. And you said it yourself that foot is moving toward the ball. And if you're rolling on the inside edge of that foot, I think that's the answer he was looking for. That's all.
I guess that's a hard one to generalize, because like the foot is not moving toward the ball at all.
No, it's
the
rolling
foot is
that way.
pressing on the ground in that direction. So that this is where ground force
Correct.
can become extremely difficult to look at, because force is not motion. Force precedes the motion, and there are other aspects that we can change some of those motions by positional pieces of the body. So I would just leave it at the fact that there are slightly different positions there based on the way they're using the ground, and whether the heel's coming off the ground, staying on the ground, whether they're completely on the inside of the foot, middle of the foot. I would say that if it's getting too far to the outside of the foot, we've got a problem. But there are definite variances there with even the best players in the world on exactly how that position is going to look to us. I think that's the fair generalization to leave it at.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anthony, why don't you go ahead with your question?
Hi guys, I really appreciate the information you're putting out here this morning. I'm over at Sittler Golf, and we do a lot of club fitting. And just curious, at the completion of the 6-week program, kind of two questions. Number one, do you see a loss of club face control correlating to the increase in speed? Will be the first question. And then number two is, if you start to get the player to get a little bit more vertical ground force reaction time, does that have an impact over the dynamic lie of the golf club at impact in terms of lie angles at the point of impact, with the shaft being a little higher than it normally would have been?
Great question. So for the first one, I would say no. The way I would answer that, though, is that if you have a player that skill-wise has a 1 out of 10 skill level on face control, when they go through the speed training program, when they're done, they're still going to have a 1 out of 10 on face control. So it's not necessarily going to improve the skill elements, but it's also not going to hurt them. If you have a high-level player that's a 9 out of 10 on controlling the face, they're still going to be a 9 out of 10 on controlling the face at the end.
Okay.
That would be the best way to look at that. So I'd always recommend maybe a supplemental ball control program for anyone, regardless of what we're doing, whether it's swing coaching, speed training. I mean, I think that's a program that everyone should always have. As to the second question.
Yeah, that second one, Michael, I think you talked about the idea of force preceding the motion. Sometimes we think that the only point of vertical force is to raise our center of gravity or our body up. But we also have to remember that the other thing vertical force can do, Anthony, is it can actually stop us from moving down. And so it's not that this crazy increase in vertical force is going to cause everything to lift up, because obviously if we did that too much, we would have that scenario that you're talking about. Really good players who generate a lot of vertical force, they've offloaded and kind of get that squat down, that kind of power move, And then that increased vertical force actually stops that movement down, and
Okay.
then actually kind of gets that center of gravity back to a good position to deliver it to the ball.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'd say
awesome.
overall, if you're looking at that related to lie angles, I would say dynamic lie angle actually goes the other direction after they do speed training more often than not, especially with players that don't sequence well to start, don't engage the lower body well to start. We generally see the biggest increase in those players is going to be more of a shallowing out of the club through impact, because they're actually starting to sequence and use their lower body a little bit better in the
Awesome.
swing. So that would actually be the trend I'd see there.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to take off and go teach my class. If there's questions that in that email address, feel free to throw my email on there. I'm happy to connect with anyone offline and share some of the things that I've been finding and talk to you more. Would really enjoy that if anyone wants to chat with me more about that.
Sounds
Thanks,
good,
Tyler.
Tyler. Thank you for the help today.
Yep.
Leaving me to the science by myself now. I'll see.
Eric,
Hopefully
why
I
don't you
can
go
do it.
ahead?
Thank you, and thanks, Michael, for your time today. This is Eric Hanley at Penn State University. Question for you related to golfers who have some health concerns, primarily back issues. Do you all have any adjustments that you make in your protocols, or any recommendations when working with golfers with back issues?
Hi, Eric. Great to talk with you. I think your football team actually might be working with some of our baseball products actually currently. But anyway, cool stuff. Yes. So first of all, I would say that I'm not going to recommend somebody start a speed training program if they're in pain. I think that's the absolute baseline. I'd like people to be able to go play golf or hit balls without being in pain before they would start something like a speed training regimen. Now, that bar being set, so if somebody's in active back pain or has something like that, I'm probably it's going to be a hard recommendation for me to do that before I'd have them checked out by, at least some type of physio professional, or get them cleared that they're not going to hurt themselves. I would say that a lot of the stuff that we've seen with the non-dominant training is actually a very positive influence on the back, because one of the main reasons we see a lot of back problems in golf, especially like those lower right side, type of pains that we're going to get into the SI joints or into the lower part of the spine for a right-handed golfer, tend to be because there's a lot of force getting kind of crushed into that part of the body. So, allowing that non-dominant training to work, where we're actually going to be, doing some of that on the other side and opening up some of that, definitely makes a big, that's a big piece. I would also say too that, like the level 1 protocol, we stay pretty basic with the drills and the positions that are in there, because we know there's a lot of people that are starting this, that may not be PGA Tour level athletes. So that protocol is very much somewhat of a acclimation program to get players ready for the process. So we don't really make any specific adjustments there. Is I just say we want people to not be in pain when they start this training. I would also note that we don't hit any balls, during the speed training. It's all practice swings. So practice swings, dry swings, are going to be far less intensive on the body than even just the process of hitting a golf ball. So that's why we feel pretty comfortable that if we have a player that can hit golf balls without pain, they're going to be able to do speed training without pain, because we're not getting a lot of those residual forces going back through the body when we deal with impact and hitting the ground.
Great. Thank you.
And Nick, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We can.
All right. Cool. Thanks. Thanks for doing this, guys. Today, appreciate it. So, I've already done a SuperSpeed seminar last year. Had great success, 6-week program, all that kind of stuff. So, I have 2 quick questions. One, you said that the protocol has changed. So, is it not 6 weeks anymore? It's going to be 5 weeks. Then you kind of blend into level 2. Did I hear that correctly?
Okay. Yes. So our general recommendation on the website is going to be a 10-week primary training phase that involves 5 weeks of the level 1 and 5 weeks of the level 2 protocol. That recommendation is there just because we found that there's some players that get to permanency in 6 weeks. There's some that it takes a little bit longer to get there. Now, our recommendation on the Speed Clinic program is still going to stay at 6 weeks. And in the similar fashion to what we did in the previous program, we still introduced the level 2 protocol in that 6th week of that program. We would just be then telling players that we'd like you to continue the 3 days a week for a few weeks after that program ends, just to make sure that we get the permanency. Personally, I like that because I think that also allows you guys the opportunity to roll people over into another segment of the program, into another, into another level 2 of the protocol, if they want to keep going through that with you. And that basically gets them through that, into that maintenance phase period. I felt like from a business standpoint, if we try to always recommend, you've got to do a 10-week program when you start it. I think 10 weeks is somewhat of a higher level of commitment for a lot of golfers than 6. So I think it's better to stay with the 6-week program, in the speed clinic program, but then also just make those recommendations as necessary to make sure that they get to those levels of permanency.
Gotcha. And my one other quick question, because talking to, say, fitness professionals and stuff like that, in regards to cognitive load, like, where you feel like your body needs to be when you actually do this. So I know that I tell my students when it comes to full swing, hey, if you don't have the mindset to work on your full swing that day, you don't have the cognitive kind of like wherewithal, don't do it. Go do something else. So when it comes to the 3 days a week, do you see any adverse effect when you have somebody say they're just not up for it that day and they can skip for it and like kind of do it instead of 1 day in between, kind of just make it 2 days instead of that one? Do you see any adverse effects when it comes to, speed training and stuff like that?
I would say speed training is the most important type of training for you to be into it and intense with it when you do it. Like, you're going to get into this what you get out. Correct. If you're in a day where you're tired and you're fatigued and you're not going to be maxing out your speeds, you might as well not do the training. The 3 day a week with a day off recommendation is actually because most of the people that contact us want to do it more. Like, they see the results right away and they're like, well, why can't I do this every day?
Oh, more must be better.
Right, exactly. So 3 days a week with a day off in between is kind of the happy medium of where we feel like it's an intense program, especially for a player that doesn't have a fitness professional, that may not have a coach, just somebody where this is the only thing they do. 3 days a week, I think, is great. Now, if I have a PGA Tour player that's in the gym 4 days a week, that's doing other types of ballistic training, that's doing all kinds of other things, that has, swing programs and everything else, I could even see reducing that 3 days a week to maybe 2, and you're going to be fine getting the same results there. But again, we have to talk to a few 100,000 people that use our stuff at this point. And, obviously it's a better scenario if they have a fitness professional or they have a golf coach and they have that team around them. But most of the people that use the products at this point do not.
Cool. Now, because that comes up a lot, where I had a guy use all 4 speed sticks. I'm like, look, this is just not the way that works. Like, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. You might even go slower. So I'm like, look, follow the protocol. You don't need to do extra because you're already doing stuff on top of that. But, some people are just crazy.
I mean, again, we've tried to make it as simple as possible for somebody to be able to, get this product, go online, and go through this training. We obviously can't control what every one of those people do. That's why we love it when, professionals like yourselves are able to walk people through this process, because that's going to be more effective. There's just no way around it, because you can keep them out of their own way. I mean, I can tell you story after story, but it's amazing to see even the best players in the world will have those type of issues. Like, obviously it's better if I do more, or obviously it's better if I do more. I had a top 50 in the world player come up to me in an event about 3 years ago and say, yeah, I need to talk with somebody about this. I'm not really sure. I only got to the blue club in a month. And I'm like, how did you only get to the blue club? You use all 3 of them in every session. He's like, really? That isn't what I was doing. It's like, yeah, well, did you watch the videos? It's like, no, I didn't watch. It's like, I mean, we're talking about the best players in the world, and it's hard to even, again, we've tried to keep it as simple as possible, but, you guys are our arms out there in the world to try to, really walk people through this stuff in the best way. So that's why we do a lot of these programs. We want people to be working with you when they're doing this, because they're going to get more out of it.
I think I need to just invest in a bigger whip, Mike. I think that might be the thing. But thanks for your answers. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Any other questions? No? All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time and your support. We really appreciate it. Everyone else, be on the lookout for an email from SuperSpeed with some of the information they mentioned. And we really appreciate you taking your morning to spend time with us.
Absolutely. No problem, guys. Like I said, love doing this stuff. Got to go get the kids ready for preschool, but you know, all is well. I hope everybody has a great day. And like I said, if there's anything else we can do to help, feel free to reach out to us through our website. Like I said, the email address info@superspeedgolf.com, or hit us up on social media. Whatever we can do, we're here to support you. So please let us know how we can help.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, Michael.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye
Matt.
now.